Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and we have three massive news stories coming out of the Super Bowl. I know it's Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday. I'm not going to be watching, but everybody is at Radio Row doing interviews, talking to the media, and the San Francisco 49ers have been well represented there in New Orleans. Fred Warner has talked, George Kittle has talked, and with the media all in one place at the exact same time. There are rumors flying everywhere. There's news coming out every 5 minutes or so, and we have three insane great news for the San Francisco 49ers in regards to Christian McCaffrey's health, George Kittle and Brock Purdy contract talks, updates, plenty coming your way on today's show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let's get into what we've been hearing at the Super Bowl thus far this year, starting off with Christian McCaffrey. He had one of the more troubled seasons of Niner players. He got hurt in training camp during preseason, didn't play in the preseason, but got hurt during training camp. Was having kind of contract talks. Once they sign him to a new contract, the hope is great. You have the offensive player of the year on the field for you in 2024. That was not the case. Leading into week number one, we get the news of an Achilles injury that was stemming from the calf injury that he had in 2023. It turns into bilateral Achilles tendonitis. He misses 10 weeks, comes back, plays 4 games, gets hurt again, hurts the PCL, and is done for the season. We have an update when it comes to Christian McCaffrey and his health leading into 2025. According to his father, Ed McCaffrey, who many of you may have known as a Broncos legend out there in Denver, he said that Christian McCaffrey expects to be fully healthy by next week and is going to have a complete off-season program ahead of him. So great news for Christian McCaffrey. We know what it means. We know what it's like to have CMC on the field for the San Francisco 49ers. The minute he came over from Carolina, this offense took that next step, and we saw what it was like this year, not having him on the field for almost the entirety of the season outside of 4 games. While Jordan Mason played really well in his absence, he couldn't last the entire year. We saw spurts of greatness from Isaac Guerendo, but again, the injuries caught up to him later in the season. When Christian McCaffrey's out there, this offense is different. It's explosive. It's dynamic. He can do it all. He's a great receiver. He's a phenomenal running back to a point of you can say he may be one of the most dangerous offensive weapons in the entire NFL when he's healthy. Won the Offensive Player of the Year for a reason. Madden cover athlete for whatever it's worth nowadays in 2025. But Christian McCaffrey expects to be fully healthy by next week, having almost all of February, all of March, all of April, leading into May OTAs, and then the training camp periods in June and July, which of course leads into the preseason and the NFL regular season schedule for this year. So massive updates for Christian McCaffrey. He's locked in, ready to go, expects to put the injuries behind him. No more calf injury, no more Achilles injury, no more PCL injury. According to Ed McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's father, he is going to be good to go, 100% healthy by next week, and hopes to maintain that health throughout 2025. Fluffy Ninja says, what's going on, big guy? We're having a great day. What is it, Thursday? February 6th, leading into Super Bowl Sunday. But Niner news always takes up most of my day. Obviously, yours too, Fluffy Ninja. Moving along here. This morning, we're all sitting there drinking our cup of joe on our way to work. George Kittle, mind you, is out there in New Orleans this week, talking to the media, doing Radio Row stuff, seemingly sponsored by Little Caesars this week. He keeps telling people pizza, but that's George being George, mind you. But he revealed something really important because throughout this offseason thus far, albeit it's pretty short into it, we've talked about how San Francisco can navigate this offseason. How do they sign big-name free agents? How can they fit in people like Myles Garrett, Max Crosby? How do they retain people like Dre Greenlaw, Talon Noah Hufanga when they have to pay Brock Purdy? One of the major factors in freeing up money has been the constant conversation of, well, just extend George Kittle. Had a phenomenal year last year, 1,000 yards, for the red and gold in 2024. He looks like the same guy he was when he got drafted in 2017, if not way better. He looks like an all-pro again. He is, to me, the best tight end in football all the way around. He can block, he can receive. He does it all. But everyone's been saying you got to extend George Kittle. He's 31 years old. He has probably 4, 5, maybe great years left in him. Maybe a little less than that, but still, he's earned that money. He deserves that money. And today on Up and Adams, with the always wonderful Kay Adams, George Kittle confirmed and revealed that he and his agent have broached the idea of a contract extension with the San Francisco 49ers, which one in itself is phenomenal news. Obviously, you want to keep one of your great players in the building, but I had the full quote here when he was asked about what's taken so long, what's happening with the extension conversation talks. He said, and I quote here, "I'm waiting on them. I think there has been talking. I have no idea. I just work here. My agent handles that kind of stuff." Nonetheless, it is a soft confirmation of, yes, my agent and I have broached the idea with San Francisco of, hey, let's renegotiate our contracts. Let's get a new deal in place and let's keep me in San Francisco forever, hopefully. Kittle mentioned he wants to be with the Niners his entire career. He wants to stay in San Francisco the remainder of whatever may be the rest of his career. He wants to stick with the red and gold and hopefully win a Super Bowl with the 49ers. He even had, I think it shows you his mindset. He was on the Rich Eisen show today at around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock maybe. And they have 2 seats on their stage. And one of them is closer to Eisen's desk. In between that, though, is the Lombardi Trophy. Kittle purposefully sat further away in the further seat from the trophy. And everybody was like, "What are you doing?" And his words were, "I don't want to touch it. I don't want to get close to it because I have to earn that right." Now, while it doesn't have much to do about his contract talks, that mentality of like, I shouldn't even put my eyes upon, put my paws, my hands on a Lombardi Trophy unless I've earned it, shows you the reverence he has for the game. And it goes back to him wanting to win a Super Bowl so badly, and hopefully in San Francisco. If you don't know about now, George Kittle is one of the best in football. He's on the third most receiving yards in franchise history. He's behind Terrell Owens, which I think if he gets 1,200 yards in 2025, he can surpass him around there. So you could be talking about the number 2 receiving yard leader in franchise history when it's all said and done. He ain't catching Jerry Rice. No one is, but still, you're looking at arguably the second best receiving weapon in Niner history in George Kittle. He can't leave. You can't let him go. You got to bring him back. I mean, he's Brock Purdy's favorite red zone weapon, and we saw this year when this offense was absolutely, terrible in the red zone, there was one prevailing factor that helped them score some points. That was George Kittle. George Kittle has been Mr. Consistency. He gets weird hate. I understand the Super Bowl stats don't back up what he does in regular season games. I totally get that. But George Kittle, by all intents and purposes, is one of the best tight ends in football, one of the best red zone options in football, and he is Brock Purdy's best red zone weapon on this team. And you talk about re-signing Brock Purdy, and all the detractors may say, well, you have to keep a loaded roster around him. Well, if that's the case, re-signing George Kittle goes a long way into doing that and keeping this team relevant and competitive in the NFC. Kittle also said when he was asked about this team's Super Bowl window closing potentially, he said all it takes is one fell swoop and that thing is smashed wide open. I think San Francisco, having the entire offseason program, they can get guys' contracts right, including George Kittle. They can get Christian McCaffrey back healthy. They can re-sign Brock Purdy to a big deal. You're going to see a revitalized roster. You can already tell that the mentality is fresh. The mindsets have seemingly healed over from a really bad season in 2024. Sometimes in life, you got to toss your hands up and say, look, I can't change nothing. That is kind of what it feels like they've done with 2024. They've moved on mentality-wise. They're moving on and looking towards 2025. And I think George Kittle is a big example of that alongside Fred Warner as well. Kittle, on top of what he's done on the field, off the field, he won the Salute to Service Award yesterday, I think it was. He'll get it on Super Bowl Sunday. However, a lot of what Kittle is kind of getting at here is, yes, I want to get paid and I want to stay in San Francisco. However, you pay George Kittle, you free up, I believe, $10 million in cap space the next 3 seasons, barring a 4-year contract extension, which ultimately helps you. Right now, San Francisco has an estimated $48 million in cap space per over the cap. If you walked into free agency before Brock Purdy even signs, right, you're talking about $58 million in cap space. Now, they'll make some moves, they'll sign some people, but what that does is it sets yourself up to make 1 or 2 splash moves, to re-sign a guy you want to keep around for a long time. But also, that trade market's been quite the topic of conversation in recent days or so. Max Crosby was a big one earlier in the offseason. I pitched to you guys on the show. Meanwhile, Myles Garrett has been one of the more, I guess you can say, focal points of the offseason the last couple of days. You want to talk about how can they get a player like Crosby or Garrett in the building? Besides draft capital that has to get traded or whatnot, you got to have money. Extending George Kittle allows you to have more money to pay your own players, but also maybe acquire a big name like Myles Garrett or Max Crosby in the meantime. And even if you don't, you got to bring back George Kittle. He's phenomenal. He's coming off his 2nd consecutive 1,000-yard season. I think he had 8 touchdowns. Maybe it was 6, but he had 8 touchdowns, and he played 3/4 of the year with a fractured rib. Everybody knew about Fred Warner's fractured ankle. Kittle revealed today he had a fractured rib after the Patriots game. So he gutted it out. He gave it all. He gave the season his all, and that's a player you want to have in the building for a long time. Now, I think it's smart to protect yourself if you're San Francisco. Find that number 2 tight end, but you got to know. You got to get George Kittle involved in this offense as a receiver in big games. He's too good to not have involved in playoff games. He's shown some stuff in, non-Super Bowl playoff games, but George Kittle, if this team wants to win it all, has to be a factor in the Super Bowl itself, and you can't have him playing, number 6 offensive lineman in the biggest game of the year. I think we'll see that hopefully this year or next year when it's all said and done. But extend your boy, free up some money, and maybe take a big swing on the trade market or free agency. But before we get to Brock Purdy, who has stolen headlines almost every single day on the show and in the news media cycle, I want to let you know you can use our promo code 49ers Access, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to perform like the GOAT Jerry Rice himself, then you got to get yourself a can of GOAT Fuel. Whether you're an all-star athlete or a normal person like myself doing podcasts in his office, GOAT Fuel can bring the best out of all of us every single day. And for those of you out there who got to have your coffee but are saying, I don't want to go get Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, it's not healthy enough for me, GOAT Fuel can supply you with a healthy coffee alternative. Click that link down below in the description and grab yourself a can of GOAT Fuel to feel like the greatest of all time. Okay, let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers quarterback, Brock Purdy. The thumbnail has his name front and center for a reason, because his contract is one of the more polarizing topics of conversation thus far through free agency. Everybody has an opinion on how much Brock Purdy should get paid, or if he will even get paid this off season. And because of that, again, all the media is in one place. People were talking. We got some insight in regards to what is transpiring behind the scenes with Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers, according to the Athletic's Dianna Russini. She says the San Francisco 49ers are not looking to delay contract talks with quarterback Brock Purdy. We kind of already knew this, that from John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy himself, they don't want to let this thing linger. So that in itself, it really isn't anything new. You can tell there's going to be an effort to get this thing done sooner rather than later. But the reason why this has to kind of, I guess, continue to be confirmed and reiterated is because San Francisco tends to let things linger, whether it's Nick Bosa or Brandon Aiyuk or Trent Williams. They don't mind, kind of getting uncomfortable with money and contract negotiations. They don't mind pushing things to the brink where you're like, hey, you got to get this thing done now. If you don't, these guys are going to miss a week or two and they're going to, look like they got some rust, hence Nick Bosa and Brandon Aiyuk the last couple of seasons, albeit all those guys are really good players when they're healthy and fully paid. But that does not seem to be the case with the San Francisco 49ers and quarterback Brock Purdy. And the full quote here from Russini says this isn't something they're going to be pushing off. I think this is something that they're both in line with. Let's get the ball rolling on this and figure out where we are going to land on a number. So then the question becomes, okay, you want to get things done. You want to narrow down timelines and avoid holdouts and avoid these elongated contract negotiations. What is that number? Where and how much will Brock Purdy land and get paid? That's kind of the big sticking point here. You can have the intention of wanting to get things done. You can have the intention to want to sign early and avoid contract holdouts. But as soon as you involve money, as soon as you involve the paper, the green, you involve someone else's livelihood, that's when things get tricky. I can talk about this myself. You're trying to negotiate for a higher salary, a higher money count. You want to get as much as you think you're worth. And when you feel like, hey, that ain't cutting it, it can create problems for you. You hold out, you pull a Brandon Aiyuk, you hold in, you pull a Nick Bosa and say, look, I'm not even going to be here at all the entire time. You call me when you're ready to renegotiate a contract with my agent. Although I don't see things getting that bad because you have to pay your quarterback. You have to get this done. This ain't a defensive end. This isn't a receiver. This is your star franchise quarterback, which currently you only have two on the roster. It's Brock Purdy and Tanner Mordecai. You don't have Joshua Dobbs. You don't have Brandon Allen. And even if you did, would you really feel comfortable playing both those guys if Purdy happened to hold out? I'm going to assume no. Even with that fourth place schedule next year, I don't think you want to risk losing a couple games early in the season because Brock's holding out for a new contract. So, all that to say, what is Brock Purdy worth? What is the number that he is going to get this offseason? We've heard numbers as low as $30 million, given that Baker Mayfield type contract. We've heard numbers as high as $65 million this offseason, which would surpass Dak Prescott's record-breaking $60 million per season that he signed last year with the Dallas Cowboys. We even heard some people say don't pay Brock Purdy at all. There really has been a fluctuation, a variety of answers as to what San Francisco should do with Brock Purdy, but Dianna Russini has given us a kind of gray area, if you will, a kind of given us the end and the beginning of the spectrum for where Brock Purdy could get paid. She gave us a very clear cut. This is how much he'll get paid at least, and this is how much he'll get paid at the most. According to the Dianna Russini, Brock Purdy is likely going to get between $55 million per season and $60 million per season. So essentially, he'll get the either Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow contract, or he'll get a Dak Prescott-like contract in 2025. But I know some of you out there are saying that's too much. You can't give Brock Purdy that big of a contract. You just can't do it. You can't do it at all. And guess what? Dianna Russini addressed all of you out there who was saying you shouldn't pay Brock. It's too much money. He's being selfish. He's a team player. Take a team-friendly contract. She addressed that as well. She says that I don't think Brock Purdy is the type of player that's in this to be the richest man in football. So, to your credit out there, she's saying that Brock doesn't really, his desire is not to be paid as the highest quarterback in the entire football league. But Russini continues, He wants to be paid what he's worth and continue to improve to get them to a Super Bowl. So, yes, Purdy wants to get paid. Yes, Purdy's going to get paid. However, he's not in the business of being the highest paid quarterback in football. Doesn't feel the need to make $65 million per year. He just wants to get compensated for what he's done so far and what he hopes to do next year. That's the plan. That's the goal. And I think you have to. Benali P says here, for a purely selfish reason, I hope the Niners just pay or say they're not going to pay or trade him like tomorrow, mostly because I'm tired of hearing about it already. I can't take months of this. Look, this thing's going to take until they get it figured out, right? So the Niners and Brock Purdy both say they want to get this thing done, and we'll see if that actually happens. However, I think there should be some comforting. There should be some comforting feelings involved in, like, I have no fear that Brock is going to not get paid. Like, Brock's going to get paid. And so it's not really about, if, it's just when. And sometimes the when can become an if things linger too long. However, I don't really know how much Brock gets offered on the open market, hence why people were saying, let him reach the open market and test this thing out to maybe lower that contract total and see if he'll play on the last year of his contract. Brock is scheduled to make $5 million next year via a bonus in his contract for making the Pro Bowl last year, I believe. So he'll get paid handsomely enough. However, if he wants to get $55 million per year and he's getting $5 million, there's a $50 million gap in between what he wants and what you're going to give him. So I get it. You want to get it done. It's frustrating to have another contract negotiation that may linger for a while, albeit I don't think it's going to happen. I think they'll get this thing done. My hope is that they can get Kittle settled before free agency, which is in March. Then the draft comes in April. And then as soon as the draft is over, then you pay Brock Purdy. I feel like that's what you do. San Francisco likes to do these things in stages. We often hear about restructures happening in March or before the new league year begins early in March. So I would expect that's when Kittle will get paid. If he gets paid, then they'll wait. They'll sign some free agents. They'll re-sign Dre Greenlaw. They'll figure things out. They'll kind of reshape the depth and the talent on their roster, then go to the draft, pick their 10 to 9 players if they trade up or not. However, then things change post-draft. Once you get to May, leading into OTAs, that's when you hear Brock Purdy get signed. Fingers crossed it's sooner. However, I think that's the timeline we're currently on, like just in between the draft and OTAs. Leon Sandcastle says here, if I can bring your name up, let's see what we got. Ideally, free agency, I hope, is the deadline. Think they need to know their cap limitations. So a little bit of what I was saying, albeit you're flipping Purdy and Kittle, if not maybe doing both at the same time. I think San Francisco, because they currently have $48 million in cap space, I think they feel pretty comfortable walking into free agency with that. I think that number's like top 5 in football. I don't think they're worried about, we're not going to have enough for, whatever players out there, right? I think that's why at the time you restructure or you extend Kittle then, if not restructuring or extending Fred Warner as well, freeing up $10 to $15 million. And you walk into free agency with around $60 million to spend. That way you don't really have to worry about Brock Purdy's contract at all until you get to OTAs or just before that. So I get what you're saying, and I completely agree when it comes to wanting to get things done. And like, you get your own stuff done before you start adding players to your roster and salary cap. However, I think that San Francisco really isn't worried about stuff like that. They've never, to my recollection, they've never re-signed a player, maybe outside of Jimmy Garoppolo because he was a free agent or about to be, never re-signed a player in March. Like, it's been Lenore past year was like, whoa, that's a middle of the season extension. Holy crap. They signed Dre Greenlaw during the year, a couple years back, like in week 2 or 3. They haven't gone to the offseason and said, you know what, we're going to sign our own guy back in February or March. They have been, let's get, like, once we're all back in the same building together during OTAs and training camp, that's when they kind of make their moves and talk to players. But is that smart? The last couple of years, they have said no to that and kind of pushed back on the idea. But I think that San Francisco likes the way they do things and aren't going to change much. However, I also don't think they're worried about money, at least this year. Maybe in 2 years or next year, who knows? But this year, they got plenty to spend, and they know what they're doing with it. Rick, I see your comment. I'll get to it in 1 second. I do want to get to the great one, 765's comment saying, give Purdy $60 million in Cleveland or Vegas, trade him for a top pass rusher. Okay. We have this conversation every show, great one, and I respect you a lot, and I appreciate you on here tuning in and commenting. If I'm reading into what you're saying trade Brock Purdy for, in some way or form, Myles Garrett or Max Crosby. I don't know why that's not even on the table. Like, San Francisco is not realistically, I think, even talking about that. I think that is one of those like Madden moves you make. And I'm not saying it's not realistic, because they can certainly do it. I just don't think, to your point, maybe, which you don't believe Purdy's worth, $60 million per year in San Francisco. What is he worth elsewhere? Now, I think Brock is a darn good quarterback. I think Brock is, on his best day, the 8th best quarterback in football. On his worst day, not very good at all. However, I think Brock has shown the ability to be, at times, elite. Now, he should do that more consistently, and we can start having a conversation about him being, one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league. But would the Raiders actively take, there's two sides of this, right? Like, would the Raiders actively take Brock Purdy for Max Crosby? I don't think so. I think for a team like the Raiders, they're viewing this as, say they do trade Max Crosby, I think they want some picks. I think in their mind, they're saying, look, if the Jets let Aaron Rodgers walk, we got Pete Carroll, who's 73 years old. Go get Aaron Rodgers. May draft a quarterback early. Like, they're going to want the 11th overall pick. They're not going to want Brock Purdy. And I think Brock would do and perform really well in Las Vegas. Brock Bowers is there. Jacoby Myers is there. They can find a receiver elsewhere. Like, you could feasibly make up that scenario in their mind and put it on paper, and then kind of look at it as a possible situation. But it feels like they want to get picks, get younger, and still contend. They have a lot of holes out there in Vegas, and I think they got to figure out their defense. I don't even think they're even going to trade Max Crosby now. So, in that case, let's go to Cleveland. Cleveland. They don't want to trade Myles Garrett, no matter how much Fred Warner and George Kittle and Lenore post on social media saying, hey, come to San Francisco. They don't want to trade Myles Garrett. But in this case, they effed up their quarterback situation big time. Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston was there this year. Like, they don't have a quarterback worth anything. They're all terrible out there. All of them suck. So I could see them saying, let's get Brock Purdy, and let's, if we have to trade Myles Garrett. But I also think Cleveland, oddly enough, I would not be shocked to see them wanting draft picks and trying to get Kirk Cousins. I think they want a veteran quarterback that they're not going to have to pay that much money to. Hence Kirk Cousins, hence Aaron Rodgers, albeit I don't think Rodgers plays in Cleveland. But I can easily see the Browns trading Myles Garrett for 2 first-round picks, a first-round pick, and a haul of other picks behind it, and getting Kirk Cousins. I think that makes a lot more sense. Kevin Stefanski's in Minnesota now. He was the OC, Kevin Stefanski's in Cleveland now as their head coach. He was the OC in Minnesota with Kirk Cousins. That makes a heck of a lot more sense than getting Brock Purdy, albeit I think Purdy is far better than Kirk Cousins. I think they just need some stability. And Brock can provide that, but I also believe they want to have a cheaper quarterback. They don't want to have to reset the market again when they're already paying Deshaun Watson so much money. In the meantime, they want to cheapen that quarterback room with a high upside veteran like Kirk Cousins that hopefully can bounce back after a pretty bad year off the Achilles injury. I think that is that to me makes a lot more sense than San Francisco trading away Brock Purdy for Myles Garrett or Max Crosby. But a great question you bring up is, why couldn't San Francisco trade Brock Purdy then go sign Aaron Rodgers? I think that, one, I think we see the fit. He's a California kid. They tried to get him a couple of years ago in 2021. I don't think Shanahan will be against that in particular, but I do think Shanahan has moved on. Like, at that time and place, there was this mentality of Jimmy Garoppolo's not getting it done. We got to find a quarterback that's in his prime or, at least can still get it done. And albeit Rodgers has the arm talent, I think can still make some plays. We also have to factor in the part of, like, look, would you rather have a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers that may play one more year of football, or have Brock Purdy, who has shown the ability to, at this point in time, be a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers more consistently, and have him for 4 to 5 years as your quarterback in San Francisco? Like, Kyle Shanahan openly said that I plan on Brock being here as long as I'm being here. Like, you don't say that and then in the same offseason trade the guy away for Myles Garrett. Now, you ask here, so you want to continue losing with a young, mediocre QB instead of winning with a 40-year-old quarterback. Age isn't really what I'm getting at here, because age, although it matters, it's not really about, Rodgers is 40. There are plenty of older quarterbacks in their 40s that were really good. Favre, Breeze was getting up there. Manning was getting up there. Like, older quarterbacks aren't in itself bad, but you have to talk about longevity. Let's say you trade away Brock Purdy and you get Myles Garrett. Rodgers plays 1 year. Maybe you get it done. Maybe you don't. But then he retires. What do you do then? Then you're even in a worse spot than you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when you had Trey and Jimmy and Brock and you had no idea who the hell the quarterback was going to be. Like, you're in a really bad position if you trade Brock away for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe you get 1 year of, like, oh my God, they're going to the Super Bowl and they win it. Maybe that's the case. But you are setting yourself up for the window being a 1 year maximum effort. That's not what they're trying to do. They want to have this 4 or 5 year window of, like, okay, we have Kittle, we got Aiyuk and Pearsall and McCaffrey and Grendo. We have Trent, and we have this amazing defense and Bosa and Warner. It's like, it's not about Rodgers being 40. It's about the 1 year of, like, you're only going to get maybe 1 year of Rodgers, where you're going to have some sort of longevity with Brock Purdy. Now, who knows how much that can be? Maybe it's missing the playoffs. I think Brock has shown when he's fully healthy, when the team is fully healthy, very different game. They're out there scoring 35, 32 points a game, beating everybody. Now, yes, Brock has limitations. We know this, but who's going to be more limited? A 40-year-old quarterback, maybe with 1 year left of, like, really good play, compared to Brock, who's 26. And outside of a UCL injury, he's been relatively healthy his entire career. And Brock knows the system, fits the system. This team loves Brock. The head coach loves Brock. Back when this team wanted Aaron Rodgers, he didn't love Jimmy. He didn't have Trey Lance then. He didn't have Brock then. It was like, I want to get off of Jimmy Garoppolo, get me Aaron Rodgers. Very different times, very different situations to kind of look at and say, man, like, this is not the same at all. Great one says here, Rodgers can be signed on a vet deal. We can spend that money on other positions like offensive line and draft. Well, first off, the offensive line was bad this year. Aaron Banks was atrocious. Jake Brendel was atrocious. Hence why Banks will not be back. Hence why I believe San Francisco, in some form or fashion, will have a center competition. Ben Barch was good. Trent Williams was hurt for a large part of the year. McKivitz was McKivitz. Like, you can't have 3 of your 5 offensive linemen be below average or terrible. That's what happened last year. Brock, the offense as a whole, whether it was the running game or the passing game, there was nothing working. We saw this offensive line go from dominant, it was a weapon, it was a force for Kyle Shanahan to use, to becoming then a gaping hole of, what is that? That is terrible. Guys running into each other. not picking up stunts, not knowing plays. There were so many things wrong with the offensive line. It was not fine. It was not fine. And you factor in, even if you want to give the offensive line some credit here and say it wasn't as bad as I'm saying it is fine, it also hurts to not have Brandon Aiyuk and receivers that can actually separate on slants against man coverage. Like, a lot of this factors in. Whereas Rodgers last year had Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and a honestly better offensive line than San Francisco, and the team was still bad. Like, the offense was a major problem for the Jets early in the season, hence why they fired Saleh. The defense was good early in the year. The offense was only getting 20 points a game. And they had a better group of weapons with a healthy Breece Hall, Devontae Adams later in the season, Garrett Wilson. Like, they were a better offense on paper than San Francisco was last year for the majority of time because they had a healthier team the majority of the time, including the offensive line that was really, really good. Also, like, why would you want to bring in Rodgers who, like, Saleh just fired? Like the Saleh Rodgers stuff isn't going to work. And like Rodgers, who has kind of been the diva wherever he goes, you think that's going to work in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan, who wouldn't even put up with Tom Brady, the ultimate winner? Like, now that was a mistake, but like Tom Brady, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it just. And also, if you're using PFF, I'm sorry, they're not great for this. Sometimes they're good, and sometimes it works, but PFF said Aaron Banks had one of the best pass blocking seasons of his entire career. No, really bad. And, like, you can't look at the offensive line and say it was fine when it wasn't. It was really bad. And, like, you're also looking at, like, say, like, getting rid of Brock Purdy, who obviously is not Mahomes, not Burrow, not, these top 10, top 2 guys, whatever they are. You're setting yourself up for failure because then Deebo will leave, which he might anyways. It's like, then McCaffrey gets older and Trent's older. Like, you're already going to lose some key players in the future. Why would you then add a 40-year-old quarterback to an aging roster? You're hoping you can stabilize with a young quarterback like Brock Purdy. It defeats the entire purpose of trying to keep your window open and trying to do what San Francisco is trying to get done. Like, man. So, like, Rodgers doesn't make sense. However, I do think Rodgers could find his way to the NFC West, great one. I think if you look at, and they're kind of reading the tea leaves, Matthew Stafford could be out of Los Angeles. Now, will he? We shall see. But his wife's talking on Twitter and X on her podcast. Matthew himself is saying this is kind of the end. It feels like the end, whatever. I think there's a possibility that Matthew Stafford gets traded elsewhere. And maybe Aaron Rodgers comes to LA with Sean McVay for 1 year, get it done. But even then, if they do that, which, okay, that makes sense for them. They already have an older quarterback that's kind of on his last legs in his first place, unlike San Francisco. I could see them doing that deal, saving money in the process, trying to maximize their window, but also keep draft picks, gain more draft picks, and trading away Stafford. Like, there is a real possibility if the Rams trade away Stafford, Aaron Rodgers finds his way to the Los Angeles Rams this year, in my opinion. Let's get back to the YouTube chat here. Let's see. Leon Sandcastle says that Rodgers is trash. What else do we have? Leon Sandcastle continues and says, my hope is that they realize that the hardball make them wait negotiations are costing them big time. Consistently paying top of the market money only goes up the more time passes. I would agree. However, the difference, so take last year, for example. The Brandon Aiyuk wait and see, hard-nosed negotiation, hardball negotiations bit them in the butt big time. So many receivers got paid as they waited. And when they did that, the number went from like 26 to 30. And it cost them the $4 extra million per year. And Aiyuk held in the entire offseason program leading into week 1. The difference is last year, there was like 7 different top-tier receivers wanting to get paid. I can't think of one other quarterback on the open market that wants to get paid. Like, who's getting extended this offseason? Brock? Um, that's it. Like, nobody else quarterback wise is up for a contract. Now you may see reworkings of deal, like, but Russell Wilson's not getting paid Brock Purdy money. Justin Fields ain't getting Brock Purdy money. Like, no one's signing Daniel Jones to a high-end contract like that. Maybe Sam Darnold, but even then, like, Brock Purdy has 2 years of success compared to Sam. Sam is more likely to take a Baker Mayfield style deal compared to Brock, who'll probably get more of a Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow kind of deal. Like, that is where the difference is. I agree with you, though. The hardball stuff only works at times. In this case for Brock, I think it could work, but last year I think has kind of burned some people when it comes to the Brandon Aiyuk stuff of like, look, you waited so long, you saw it happened. I just don't think that's the case this year when it comes to market and market value in 2025. Lori Matthews says here, Brock is better than mediocre. Rodgers is a cancer and lost big games in his prime. Yeah, I have a hard time buying into the fact that Rodgers fits in here. He was a big reason as to why things didn't work out with the Packers in the end. A major factor into why things fell apart with the Jets last year, albeit the Jets are a major mess and it's not on Rodgers, but a lot of it is. And I just don't think like the talent is there for Aaron. Like the talent's always been there, albeit he's older now, so it's lesser than it was. Aaron's always been talented. But when you look at the culture in San Francisco, who they've brought in, who they've let go, who they've acquired via trade, who they traded away themselves, Aaron fits in the category of guys they've let go in the past, guys they've avoided in free agency. Now, sometimes those things work in your favor, sometimes they work in somebody else's favor, but Aaron Rodgers does not fit in San Francisco when it comes to culture, mentality, mindset, the diva-like nature. Like, he is more likely to cause problems than play elite level football for you in 2025. Whereas Brock, humble guy, you can see all the talk of leadership he's had this year. Now, how much does that matter? I have no idea, but Brock has played at a high enough level to, I think, not even entertain the idea of replacing him this year unless it's for Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. Like, I don't even think, if the Dallas Cowboys or the Philadelphia Eagles or the Detroit Lions broached the San Francisco 49ers and said, hey, we'll give you Jared Goff or Brock Purdy 1v1. We'll give you Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts 1v1. I think San Francisco would say no. I think they believe in Brock that much. I truly believe that. JD Durham says here, those quarterbacks can't move. We have no line. Purdy ran all the time. I think it's a good point. I think Purdy, to be fair, at times Brock not having Christian McCaffrey, which goes back to thank God Christian's going to be healthy in the next week or so. There was early season hesitancy from Brock when it came to taking checkdowns. Now, that's on him. Mason was there. Grando was there. Brock should have taken checkdowns instead of running at times. The Rams game early in the year is a big example of that. However, even late in the season, there's free rushers, guys not doing their job. Brendel is terrible at pointing out, literally sliding the offensive line the incorrect way, where the pressure's coming from. That can't happen. That's not Brock's job in the offense. Hence why Shanahan likes to have veteran established centers. Alex Mack, Weston Richburg, and Brendel a couple years ago, sure, it worked out, but I don't know what happened. It was a part of his brain fell out during the offseason. Not the same player. I don't know what scrambled him. And he was never great, but he was good enough. This year, it was a flip. There was a switch of just, I'm mediocre to above average to, oh my God, I don't even know how to block anymore. That's how bad Jake Brendel was. Benali P says, Purdy would improve the Jets long-term more than Rodgers would improve the Niners long-term. There isn't a long-term if you put Rodgers on San Francisco. It is a 1, maybe 2-year contract. Maybe. And at that point, you are sitting here like, well, and if you're good, mind you, like say they're 10-7, 11-6, they're in the playoffs, you're not getting a quarterback worth a damn in the NFL draft at that point in time. And like once you get the guy in the building, you don't let the guy go. Like this isn't a Daniel Jones situation. This is a we got the guy. We know we got the guy and we're going to sign the guy. Whereas the Giants didn't know they had the guy. They were like, oh, it's Saquon or Daniel. The quarterback's more important. And we saw what happened. Meanwhile, the Niners have seen what Brock can do. He's more important. And to like their success will be tied to Brock Purdy. Now, will it work out? I have no idea. I think so. I hope so. But they're going to pay him. They're going to pay him. GD Durham says here, what's the difference between Brandon Allen and Aaron Rodgers? I mean, I'd rather have Joshua Dobbs. Aaron Rodgers wasn't that bad last year, to be fair. Like, I'm kind of crapping on him, but I mean, like, that's when it's compared to Brock Purdy. Rodgers wasn't terrible. Rodgers deserved to go to the Pro Bowl over Drake May. Like, that's the truth. Rodgers' arm talent is still there. It's not his play that's really the problem. Yes, he's older, the mobility's down, but it's more so about the mentality. Like Rodgers at this point in time, when things get tough, he quits. He quits and pouts. That's what he does. He blames other people for the problems the offense has, blames the receiver, blames the offensive line. Rarely ever does Rodgers point into himself and say, oh, it's on me. It's on me. Whereas Brock's like every other game, my fault, my fault, my fault, my fault. When the going gets tough, he makes some mistakes. They all do. Brock's not going to give up, not going to point fingers, even when Ronnie Bell was atrocious against the Rams early in the year. Drop that pass that would have won in the game. Brock was like, we love Ronnie. It's my guy. It's our guy. Like, he's like, we love Ronnie Bell. When we all knew it was Ronnie Bell's fault. And he's not here for a reason. Like, Brock is that guy. Rodgers is the point fingers. Brock's like, no, that's on me. Take accountability. And fans love that. The team loves that. And that's why it plays in San Francisco. Let's see. What else do we have here on the YouTube chat? Jason, I'm assuming it's Captain, Niner fan Massey says, Talofa faithful? What's going on? Leon Sandcastle says here, Brock's mobility improves the offensive line grades. That's also very true. They say, oh, he holds onto the ball for so long. He has so much time to throw. In reality, he's running for his life because he doesn't have time to read. I think two things can be true there. Yes, sometimes Brock holds on to the football too long. In the same breath, in the same vein, he's running for his life because nobody's open. And in return, the offensive line isn't holding up, which isn't always their fault. Sometimes, like, people forget that you need all 11 guys to do their job. If the offensive line's holding up but nobody's open, that's the receiver's fault. Maybe it's good defense, right? If the quarterbacks hold on to the ball for too long and the offensive line is doing their job and the receivers are open, it's on the quarterback. Pull the trigger. Meanwhile, the offensive line sucks, the receivers are open, and the quarterback has no time to throw. It's on the offensive line. You got to have a team. You got to have a team effort. And unfortunately for Brock, albeit sometimes his fault, not taking checkdowns, offensive line wasn't that good, and receivers weren't getting open. Both those things matter. Let's see. 1777 memorabilia. Larry Sports Talk says we have to pay. I'm assuming you meant Brock, not broke Purdy. I mean, yeah, you're right. He continues here, says, can't have our QB1 making $100K while dudes on the team are getting $1 million per game. Yeah, I think that's true. Now, you don't just pay guys because other guys are getting paid more, but yeah, like you can't have one of the most important pieces of your team, of your success the last 2 or 3 years, get $5 million per year when the market dictates 55 per year. That's just how sports work, how the market works, and everything. Bobo says here, do the Rams approach, say F them picks. After 32 years, I just want this one ever elusive championship. Go get Garrett, get Crosby, get Watt, whatever it takes to just get the 6th. San Francisco tried the FTM pick strategy. It brought him Trey Lance. Now, the FTM picks thing, the Stafford Goff deal, very different. You're getting, two established quarterbacks and draft picks involved. I think San Francisco wanted to make that move. They would have made that move. The Rams kind of swooped in and took Stafford away. It happens. But they tried that. They tried the FTM pick stuff, and ultimately it put them in this hole they're currently in. All the talk of trying to get youth, have this kind of influx of talent on your roster. Imagine having 3 other first-round draft picks to help you. Like, they tried the FTM pick strategy, and it just failed miserably. Hence why Brock Purdy's here. Like, oddly enough, it created a massive chain reaction to get to Brock Purdy, which I don't think they trade for. However, had they gotten Stafford with the FTM picks trade in 2021, they'd probably be winning a ring right now and have 6 championships, if not more. That's how tight things were. But I get what you're saying. I am a proponent of trading for Myles Garrett. I would go get Max Crosby if you could. I think having 2 edge rushers makes the most sense, but the FTM pick strategy, I think, would include re-signing Brock Purdy to a massive contract. And if you re-sign Kittle to a new deal and extend him, you got plenty of money to play with. Like, you can go get Myles Garrett if you want to and also extend him as well. Ahmad says Brock is a mid-level quarterback with a noodle arm. Just fighting words. No, I'm kidding. So maybe you can expand on your comment here, Ahmad, because when I look at Brock, the stature is small. Sure. The arm isn't the best. Okay. What has Brock done to prove to you that he's mid? Like, you hear that term pointed out, oh, he's mid. Like, if you rated Brock in your quarterback tier list, where would you put him? Because mid to me is about 13 to about 18. That's mid to me. I think Brock's probably about, or maybe it's, 15 to 18, 15, 20 on your tier ranker, if you will. Like, Brock to me is much better than the 15th best quarterback in football and has proven that over and over again. Like, 15 through 20 is where you get into, like, this last year, your Caleb Williams is, and I get there's potential there still, but that's where you get into those conversations of like, well, Brock is better, and like Trevor Lawrence last year looked like a pretty bad quarterback compared to what he's shown in previous years. Brock is head and shoulders above Trevor Lawrence. Now, you can talk about systems and stuff, but that doesn't matter. It's about production. And Brock has produced a lot better than a lot of other quarterbacks ranked usually ahead of him because of their traits. Brock has, in a way, outperformed with his noodle arm, if you will, a lot of the traits other quarterbacks have on other teams. Let's see what we have here. Ahmad says Brock is limited. He can't play in adverse weather conditions. Noodle arm. I would still take Rodgers over Brock. I mean, sure, the rain stuff matters. The snow stuff matters for sure. But San Francisco, it doesn't usually snow. And in recent years, it hasn't really rained. It's rained like twice during the season, which both games, one of them Brock wasn't playing, and when it was at Levi's Stadium against the Colts in 2021. But against the Ravens 2 years ago in December, yes, it rained. He didn't play great. But saying Brock can't play in adverse conditions when it's snowing in Buffalo, when most quarterbacks couldn't perform in that, I think it's unfair. However, I get your point. I think a lot of last year came down to Brock's processing. It wasn't as good as it had been in previous years. Whereas like the arm stuff doesn't, like, Brock has a good enough arm to play in the NFL. But last year he made some pretty bad decisions, and then you add in the arm stuff. Like the interception against the Rams, like with Jawan Jennings in double coverage. You can't make that throw. The ball got there. It is well enough of an arm to get there. This was a bad throw. Not because of the arm strength, because of a bad decision he made compared to his arm strength. Ahmed Z says that Brock is just Jimmy with mobility. Well, that's just not true. Really not true. People say this with like no basis whatsoever. other than, oh, he's tinier. He had one bad year. And when McCaffrey didn't play, it wasn't as good. When Aiyuk didn't play, it wasn't as good. Go back and watch the Jimmy G era football here. He's clearly being carried by Deebo Samuel. Now, Jimmy did some things well, but Brock is so much better than Jimmy G as a processor, throw of the football. Like Brock, like Jimmy was never one to make elite level throws. Brock makes an elite level throw once a week, and you're like, oh wow, it's great. Now, sometimes it is marred by other bad decisions around him, but those are so few and far between. Brock threw 12 interceptions this year. 12. It's like nothing. Like, I get it. They won 6 games, and I totally understand that. He only threw 12 picks. It's nothing. People act like he's throwing picks left and right and he's making mistakes. He's not. Now, could he do better? Of course. There's so many plays left out there. But Brock wasn't making like back-breaking mistakes every game. Lions was one for sure. Rams game late in the second half of the year was one for, like, there are games you point to and say, yeah, that's on Brock. But for like 85% of the year, Brock was not making these terrible mistakes like Jimmy would make. And also, who cares that Rodgers is going to the Hall of Fame? It doesn't matter. Who cares? A lot of players are going to the Hall of Fame aren't worth a damn when they're 40 years old. Don't fit into your window. Like, Brett Favre was going to the Hall of Fame. The Jets signed him. What did it do? Nothing. It doesn't matter. Like, there are plenty of great players going to the Hall of Fame. One like Isaac Bruce, when he signed with San Francisco, was on his way to the Hall of Fame. Didn't do it. Didn't do anything. Didn't do anything for this team whatsoever. Now, he was like 40 years old almost. It doesn't matter what your end of career may be when you're living in the now. Rodgers is no longer, at this point in time, playing at a Hall of Fame level. He's playing at a level around the 15th best quarterback in football, where Brock has been better than that the last 2 or 3 years. Lori Matthews said, this is a stupid conversation. It's never going to happen. Move on. I'd agree. It's not worth it whatsoever. Whatsoever. The Niners are not going to pay Brock, or excuse me, not going to pay Rodgers, because I'm a Brock sexual, according to Ahmed, which is not true. I am someone that on this show has ripped Brock after many mistakes. Now, maybe you found the show in the offseason. That's great. But I am not one to point to Brock and say it's all your fault for a lot of other things going wrong. Like, you put Rodgers on this team last year, very similar outcome. I can argue last year, the Jets on offense had a better, more complete unit because of no injuries than San Francisco had. They were still bad. And I can argue in a worse division than San Francisco. The Dolphins were pretty bad most of the year. The Patriots sucked. Like, the Jets were also bad. Like, dysfunctional because of how bad they were. All Brock did was throw interceptions in the clutch. It's not true. Oh, man. You have Brock at 12. Okay. But 12 isn't mid. Like, that's the thing. 12 isn't a mid quarterback. Like, 12 is the range of Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott and other like Sam Darnold this year had a really good year. In the grand scheme of things, he's probably the 14th best quarterback in football based on this year. Based on the last 2 or 3 years, he's probably in the 16 range because you don't know which quarterback you're going to get. Like, if Brock is 12 and there's 32 quarterbacks in football, you're saying there's 20 other quarterbacks worse than him. That's not mid. That's really good. Not elite. That's really, really, really good. Papa J says here, you're the man. I appreciate that. Brock Purdy's also the man, as you say. What does it say? I heard a pro Lamar MVP argument where they said that Purdy completed a longer pass in the snow than Allen did, and said, surely that's not true. Apparently, according to the next gen stats, I have no idea that's the case. But this is what I don't want to happen. Yes, Brock Purdy has his flaws, 100%. No one's saying he doesn't. Brock needs to get better. That's 100% true statement. He knows that. He knows that. But it's like, do not let 2024 be a referendum on Brock Purdy's previous 2 years. I'll tell you that. George Kittle will tell you that. Fred Warner will tell you that. Analysts will tell you that. They know more than me. Kyle Shanahan will tell you that. Now, look, there are mistakes he made when it comes to Brock Purdy, throwing picks against the Rams, and the Lions, against the Cardinals early in the year. The interception killed them, along with Jordan Mason's fumble. Like, I'm not here to defend Brock Purdy because everything he does is perfect. No, it's not the case. However, they're going to extend him. They're going to hopefully get it done sooner rather than later. And according to Dianna Russini, they're going to give him $55 to $60 million. And if Brock's 2 of 3 years of play are to be an example as to what's to come, they're going to be hyper competitive in the NFC. They're going to likely contend for a few more Super Bowls, or at least be in the NFC Championship game a handful of times. And if that fails, they'll move on, get a new quarterback. But I tell you this, it's worth the risk, if you will. It's worth paying a Brock Purdy to keep the window open. It's open now. It's open right now. And if you get back CMC, like last year was such a down year for everybody. Fred Warner was not an all-pro. I'm sorry. He did not play like all-pro Fred last year. He'll tell you that himself. A lot of guys didn't play well. If you put any other quarterback on San Francisco, maybe besides Josh Allen, who can win games by himself, Lamar Jackson, who can win games by themselves, even the Bengals, Joe Burrow missed the playoffs. And they had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown fully healthy almost the entire year. Their defense was terrible. Same as San Francisco's at certain points this year. Like, don't just fixate on Brock when there are so many other examples of elite level quarterbacks failing in the exact same situations, or quarterbacks have name value more than Brock that played worse last year, or the year before that, or the year before that. Brock has done too much and built up too much goodwill to just sit back and be like, man. And to say Chase Brown was a backup last year, Chase Brown, if I can find it here for you, I'm going to read you his stats. And I want you to tell me Chase Brown was a backup last year for the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase Brown last year had 229 rushing attempts, 990 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So 10 yards away from 1,000. You go to his receiving stats. Last year, as a receiver, 54 receptions, 360 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So as a whole, on scrimmage yards alone, he had 1,400 scrimmage yards and 11 touchdowns. But Chase Brown's a backup for Joe Burrow. Come on now. If you're going to hate on Brock Purdy, fine. But don't lie about it. Don't lie. Chase Brown was one of the best running backs in the entire league last year. And no, he was not a backup. He backed up literally nobody last year. He was their starting running back. Mixon was in Texans last year, was in Houston. Come on, man. If you're going to come in here, and I respect the heck out of you, great one, Mixon don't even play in Cincy no more. You don't get 500 touches or near that in a 1,400 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns as a backup. It's impossible. No. Joe Burrow was in the exact same situation as Brock was last year. They missed the playoffs too. And Joe Burrow was phenomenal. All that to say, you need help. You got to be healthy. Get Aiyuk back. Pearsall has the entire offseason program. They pay Brock Purdy. They extend George Kittle. You get Christian McCaffrey back, which he should be healthy by next week. This is massive news for San Francisco. Kittle having contract talks. McCaffrey going to be healthy by next week, and Brock Purdy's going to get paid. But only P says here, if Brock Purdy's floor is 2024 and his ceiling is 2023, that's worth investing in. and then at the next 4 years, they're not seeing the return on the investment, move on. It's that simple. Like, Brock is not going to tank the window. And San Francisco has shown enough that if they don't get it done in 2 or 3 years, they'll start looking elsewhere. Jimmy Garoppolo had one good season in 2019. One complete full season in 2019. They immediately were like, oh, Tom Brady's out there. Let's see what happens. Then he had a pretty down 2020. And then a year later, they were like, oh, well, Matthew Stafford's out there. Like, this team does not want to be complacent. Even if you're scared of paying Brock Purdy $65 million, they're not going to tie themselves to him and be like, oh, sinking ship. What do we do? They'll figure something else out. They'll move on. And by that time, in 2 years, 1 year's time, Deebo's gone. Trent Williams is probably gone. Like, this team is going to look so completely different when Brock is in the final year or two of his contract. Forget that. It's like the 2 years, 3 years now matter more than anything. And Brock is going and has shown the ability to maximize that. Hence why they're going to pay him $55 to $60 million. Papa J says here, that's why I propose a 5-year, $300 million with $180 million guaranteed. Yeah. Now, there's reports by Tim Kawakami earlier this offseason that said San Francisco may be trying to lower the annual value, lower the guarantees. I can see that too, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever they sign him to is going to be a multi-year deal, 3+ years. The window will be open the entire time he's here, most likely because of Brock Purdy. So the Aaron Rodgers conversation ain't worth it. Done having it here. And I think it's good to know, the big news is that they're going to pay Brock Purdy. They want to get things done. George Kittle having contract talks for an extension, and Christian McCaffrey's fully healthy again. If you want to have this talk about, Purdy, no. There's this team is getting healthy. They're on the come up. They have 10 draft picks. They got plenty of money. And I would not be shocked. You've heard Fred Warner and George Kittle and Lenore try to get Myles Garrett, saying, come to San Francisco. I'll pay your contract. All that stuff. Well, I would not be shocked to hear San Francisco makes a pretty large offer for Myles Garrett now. If they get him, I don't know. But I would not be shocked. They really, really, they are in the business of making splash moves, paying Brock, extending Kittle, and making us a big signing. We never thought they were going to sign Javon Hargrave, and they did. Now, it didn't work out, but they will make risky, big-time moves if they think it helps the team. I think Myles Garrett really helps the team. And paying Brock Purdy, well, ultimately, can also free up some money. It can help you get a better idea of how much you can spend this offseason. So, a lot of big stuff happening, Radio Row leading up to Super Bowl Sunday. A lot of news today. Brock Purdy news, Christian McCaffrey news, George Kittle news. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Leave us that 5-star review on the audio podcasting platforms. Follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. You can use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. And click that link down below in the description to get yourself a can of goat fuel to feel like the greatest of all time. I want to thank the great 1765. I love the conversation. Tommy Huxley, Benali P, Papa J, Lori Matthews, 1776, Larry Sports Talk, Leon Sandcastle, Bobo. All of you are great. Even Ahmed, who is going back and forth with me, Papa J. All of you are great. Jason, Captain Niner Massey, thank you guys so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, putting comments in the YouTube chat. It all means a ton. Again, like, share, subscribe, leave that review. And until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy Super Bowl Sunday if you're watching it. I know I won't be. But until next time, as always, stay faithful.